It feels like there's a new open source company every day. Open source versions of existing things, open source tools meant to replace stuff that you're already used to using, open source everything, to be frank. There's more and more of it. There's more companies trying to contribute to open source. Why are there suddenly so many people trying to get their hands into the open source space? What benefit could they have for giving their software away for free? There's a lot of layers to this, and I think about it a ton as I try to decide what parts of my work to share and not share. Like T3 Chat isn't open source, but I've shared a ton of the code and the secrets for how we built it, versus something like Upload Thing, where all of the client-side code, the packages, and the parts you use are open source, but other parts aren't. And then various other services like Marker Thing are fully open source. Create T3 app obviously is too. There's a lot of difficult balancing work you have to do as you figure out what should or shouldn't be open sourced. Or you can just say fuck it and open source everything, which is what PostHog did. And they just posted an article that I'm actually very excited to dive into about why they do this and what the benefits have been many years into open sourcing all of their product. Obviously, we're all fans of open source, and it's obviously one of the reasons I can push PostHog as easily as I can. It's a super easy recommendation because if you don't like it, you can fork it and make changes or host it yourself and save yourself some money, perhaps, but probably not. PostHog isn't sponsoring this video though, and as much as I love open source, it doesn't pay the bills. So we're going to take a quick break for today's sponsor, who again is not PostHog. They did not pay me for this or tell me to at all. I just was excited about the concept and wanted to read it. A quick word from someone else, and then we'll dive in. I'm going to be honest with you guys. I'm getting more and more overwhelmed with the amount of code review I have to do lately. There's like 50 PRs open right now on T3 Chat, and I feel like I'm going mad. There's one thing making me feel much better about it, though. Today's sponsor, Graphite. When trying to describe Graphite in the past, I've jokingly said, imagine if GitHub cared, but honestly, the more I use it, the more I feel like that's true. It's the best place to code review. It works like an interface on top of GitHub, but it does so much more than that. Even just the inbox is worth the investment alone, I would argue. If you've ever tried using notifications on GitHub, you know how useless it is, and the difference here is just night and day. You get actual priority queues telling you what you should be working on at any given time. But the actual review experience is the thing I want to talk about here. Right before filming this, I was reviewing a 3,000-line PR. Yes, really. The fact that it doesn't lag and just works for PRs this big is a huge win, but the new chat feature has been way more useful than I expected. I'm covering it a little with my face here, but I asked it after getting a summary, is there any model-specific behavior in this PR? Because this is a huge pull request. I don't want to hunt trying to find things that are if-else statements that are for a specific model. And it gave me a really good description. It told me that the image token calculations vary based on model and provider, as well as pointing out that, where is this piece? This is really important. GPT-4o Mini gets special image processing. That was a really big call out that I might have missed when I was reviewing this code. And I was able to jump in front and say, hey, maybe we should just turn this off for this model. Oh, it saves so much time. It's not going to replace code review, but that's not the point. You shouldn't be trying to replace code review. You should be trying to make it better. And Graphite is the best code review experience I've ever had. If you haven't tried them yet, you don't know what you're missing. Check them out now at soydev.link/graphite. I have a feeling I'm going to like this one. The hidden benefits of being an open source startup. PostHog wouldn't be here now if it wasn't open source. It's that core to our success, and it has been since day one. Inevitably, though, what being open source means has changed as we've grown. It started as a product differentiator, but it's evolved to be more than that. It's a core part of our culture and our business strategy. I have a lot of my history of PostHog that we'll go into throughout, but make sure I show my team's contributions at some point, or the whole point of this video is going to be moot to an extent. I'm very thankful PostHog is open source because we've had to fix things. That's just one of the many layers, though. Throughout the evolution of PostHog, they've learned a lot about both the benefits and downsides of being open source. They've detailed them here in hopes that more will follow the path. For transparency, here's our open source credentials. You can find PostHog's code and work publicly on GitHub. The majority is MIT licensed, but there are a few parts that are separate enterprise licenses. It's worth noting that it's difficult to self-host due to the amount of parts of the product, but it is absolutely able to be done. The DevX team is working on unifying the dev environment with self-hosted to make it better. And it's totally fair to have different definitions of open source, or what some would call open core, but they're coming from the position that they're in right now. Makes all the sense in the world. First and foremost, it distinguishes you from the crowd. Rarely is a software product entirely original. Everything's a remix. I am going to resist the urge to go down a tangent about how Remix was not open source for a long time. Problem for another day. This creates a lot of competition, but being open source instantly distinguishes you from your closed source competitors. Many new products ride this differentiation to successful launches. Just look up open source alternative on Hacker News to see how successful this is. Docs is the open source alternative to Notion. Bruno is the open source alternative to Postman. Libre Taxi is the open source alternative to Uber and Lyft. Supabase, classic, is the open source alternative to Firebase. You get the idea. We know this because PostHog did the same. We launched as open source product analytics, which helped them get the first 1,000 users. A couple of days after posting on 8gen, we reached nearly 300 deployments, and with a little paid Twitter promotion, our repo started trending on GitHub. This swell of interest was all thanks to being open source. Kind of crazy to see this from 2020, knowing how big and important PostHog is now. It's wild. This was fueled by two groups. The first is open source advocates who are dedicated to seeing open source succeed. They use open source products whenever possible, they recommend them to others, and they post about them. We benefit hugely from this. There are over 700 messages in the brand mentions channel, including the terms open source. This is a huge part. There's this one talk about sales that Tyler did for YC forever ago. I think about this slide from this video a lot. The technology adoption curve. The curve is the points at which different parts of an audience adopt things. I will yoink that and hop to Excalibur. So, when a new thing is built, people who are deep in the industry are not going to adopt it. A very common fail case I see is someone building a new tool thinking that a bunch of Rails users are going to use it. Rails users haven't changed anything about their stack other than maybe their operating system in like 15 years. They're Rails devs. They're not a good target for building things. You need to focus on the curve of adoption. The people who try a new thing first are the people who like trying new things. Those are the innovators. If you're trying to build a thing, especially in the dev world, you need to focus on the people who actually try new things first and foremost. And that's this innovators group. These guys love to try out new shit. So you need to make sure your new shit appeals to them. So you should try to find other characteristics that these people like. One of those is open source. These people love playing with open source stuff because they're innovators. They like to try new things. They like to experiment with those things, break them, change them, do shit with them. And open source gives them way more freedom and excitement to play around with it. I would argue that basically anything you can do to get your product used by these guys early on is worth doing because these are the people that will take you down the curve. If we use T3 chat for an example, the innovators wanted access to every model because they wanted to try out all the new models right when they dropped. So it became a really important thing for us to make sure new models were supported on T3 chat within an hour of them dropping. Since we've maintained that, a lot of these innovators come to T3 chat to try out the new models. And then they realize, oh, it's actually a really good service. This is the best AI chat app that I've used. Because of that, they start recommending it to their friends. And then you start to see the early adopters, who are often just the friends of the people in this innovator section. So the innovators tell the early adopters about why they should be using the thing, create content. Whether or not you want to admit it, you might just not like the terms. I squarely fall in the innovator section because I love trying new things, both because I'm just generally into it, but I'm actually fortunate that through having a YouTube channel like this, I'm able to make a career out of my love of trying new things. Usually, this side of the chart isn't where the money is. This is where the hype is. This is where the adoption is initially. This is how you get your first users. The money is on this side. This is when you really start printing cash. So your goal is to be here. And a lot of people like to skip steps and start there. Very rarely works that way. To succeed as a business, your best bet in the developer space especially is to start here and really strategically think through the different steps to get through these different sections of users. The innovators will carry you to the early adopters, but what do you need to give them to make it easier to get the early majority on? For us, this would be things like allowing for gift subscriptions for T3 chat. If you're in one of these first two groups, the innovators or the early adopters, you might want to try and convince your mom to use T3 chat. It's a lot easier if you can just send her a link and she clicks it and now she's a user. It's also going to be things like the mobile app. I don't think we can cross this line reasonably without a mobile app. It's a thing we think a lot about. It's why we're going so hard building said mobile app, because we want to keep pushing down this path until we can get to this area, which is where ChatGPT wins right now. Again, if we look at the world I'm in with T3 chat, ChatGPT has this section locked down, Claude has this section locked down, and we're still in this early section fighting with others trying to break through. So if you're building your own products, you should really be cognizant of where you are in the innovators to laggards normal curve and make sure you're being strategic on how you go from one stage to another. Back to the article. They said that their success early on was fueled by two different groups. The first were the open source advocates, who obviously fall squarely in the innovator group. But then there are the buyers. They've been burned by closed source options and they've seen the benefits of open source products, including that they're easier to try out, they're transparent, they're free from lock-in, and the cost reduction is real too. I disagree with the lock-in point. We'll have a long discussion about lock-in later on, don't worry. Both of these groups will help boost an open source startup in launches and beyond. They create word of mouth and a ton of bottom-up growth. We've continued to see this at PostHog. There are many reasons to choose PostHog, but we still get many signups where being open source is one of the most important reasons. Very real. I know it's a big part of my pitch. When I'm trying to sell PostHog, which they're a sponsor, I do it quite a bit, I'll almost always push the fact that it is the best open source suite of product analytics tools. It is. It's so cool that you can go read the code and even make PRs, which I'll definitely be talking about in a bit. Point 2, it helps you hire great talent. I'm in a weird spot here because I happen to have way more developers in my life than I could possibly ever hire. I'm almost sad that I don't need to hire more right now because there are so many cool people I would immediately. So stop asking me to work at T3 Chat. There are 500 people ahead of you in line and none of them would DM me about it. And seriously though, like if you DM me or someone like me asking for a job at our company that's obviously not hiring, you just knocked your position in my head down a ton. It is incredibly less likely that not only would I hire you, but I would even refer you because your judgment is bad. All of that said, open source has helped me with hiring. Our superstar engineer that built the majority of Upload Thing in its current state and is helping overhaul all of T3 Chat right now, Julius, came from Create T3 App. Create T3 App was originally built by Nexel, but Julius and CJE both started contributing actively, and both have had crazy career opportunities come from their contributions to that, as well as to TRPC and many other projects since. Julius is an outstanding engineer, and the fact that we had an open source project gave him the opportunity to contribute and us the opportunity to notice. And that has helped all of us out a ton. So even though I have access to theoretically infinite engineers, we still benefit from open source for hiring great talent. Hiring is really important for startups. You want the best people. Like the difference between an 8 out of 10 and a 10 out of 10 engineer at a big company isn't particularly huge. The difference between an 8 and a 10 out of 10 in a startup is whether or not your company survives. In most cases, like you need the best people. And open source makes it way easier to figure out who is and isn't good. This is true from the very beginning of PostHog. We could thank being open source for our earliest employees, the king of ClickHouse, flip-flops and mustaches, James Greenhill, aka Jams. I did not realize that Jams came from the open source community. Apparently, James would check who started the GitHub repo constantly, and he spied a data engineer at Uber who left a star. They did a call. Jams explained that Uber had built a bunch of internal tools like PostHog for data control reasons. He found the project interesting, wanted to work on it, did a super day, and has manned our data infra ever since. Since then, being open source has been instrumental to our hiring process. Engineers know what they are getting into before they start. They can see the code base, how often we ship, and the PR process. Very good. Having good culture at your workplace is huge. And if you can literally just see it on GitHub, that's really cool. I have certainly spied on these PRs a lot. This also means they know that their code will see the light of day. Users will use it, and there won't be tumbleweeds in the GitHub profiles. That's actually a really fun thing, too. Whether or not we want to admit it, most of us like having our GitHub profile show all those little green boxes that we're working on shit. And if you're working at a company that's open source, there you go. It also means in the future, if you want to get a different job, it's really easy to put this all on your resume so you can go look at the contributions that you've made. That kind of gives you a flight risk as the company that is doing the open source work. But as long as you give a good enough culture, it kind of is an incentive balance where I have to work harder to maintain you as an employee because you have a way better portfolio for getting hired in the future. That's actually a really cool point too. They can contribute before they start. Other than at Twitch, every job I've ever had, I was contributing to before my first day. Some of that was because it was open source. Some of it's because I got early access. The point stands, great people don't wait on things as arbitrary as a date that they're supposed to write their first line of code. They just want to work on shit. Open source helps them do that. This isn't just the case for PostHog either. Many companies hire people who contribute to their open source projects and have for a long time. It's beneficial to both parties. Companies can look for and find people who are more familiar with the code base, and candidates get a preview into what working with the companies actually like. Companies can't lie when their work's in the open. This lowers the risk of their expectations not matching the reality of the job. Then point 3, it creates trust. This is one of the biggest ones. PostHog and many other open source startups are built for devs. Defining feature of devs is their strong bullshit detector. Luckily, being open source is a key way to diffuse said bullshit detector. As they say, code don't lie. I feel like AI is changing that pretty fast, but yeah. Also, JavaScript loves lying. Open source builds trust in multiple ways. Instead of saying, trust me, bro, we're working on it, we can link to issues, or better yet, pull requests that show what we're actually doing. Users can then give us direct feedback about these as we ship a solution that actually solves their problem faster. Similar to this, our decision-making process is also in the public. This, I'm assuming, is... No, it's not GitHub issues. This is just their newsletter. They're very transparent at PostHog about like the way they're thinking and doing things. I have really good comms with them in general, but I'm regularly surprised at how little info I have access to that others don't. Even though I talk to the founders a lot, I talk to Ian quite a bit, I'm friends with these guys, I don't get that much special info from it because everything they're working on is pretty public. They're not hiding shit. Being secretive about this is not the source of our advantage. Absolutely agree. If talking about what you're doing is going to put you at a disadvantage, then you don't have a real advantage. If devs need to know the details of the implementation, they can look themselves. I have had to do this quite a bit for some weird edge cases around their AI wrapper for the Vercel AI SDK, which we'll talk about a bit more later. They can audit our code for bugs and potential issues. This enables devs to self-serve answers to their issues. Yes, very, very essential for us. As buyers, you can see our pricing and the entire sales process. There's nothing behind a request demo button, white paper, or a quick call. You can even see what sorts of discounts we offer without needing to haggle like a used car salesman. And even as an employee, everything from their compensation to the benefits to the way that they work are all detailed transparently in their handbook, which is a public page. The way they run the company, the way you will work at PostHog is all detailed in their public company handbook. That's really, really cool. The trust that you create by doing this should be taken seriously. Being open source creates an implicit agreement between a company and a community. The company is expected to be transparent and consistent, and the community provides their support and contributions in return. Just to emphasize how much they care about this type of stuff, I was the first influencer campaign of any form PostHog did, and it was not them approaching me. They actually didn't have a process yet when I approached them. I hit them up and said, hey, you know I love you guys. I've been using you for everything I've built for a while. I feel like the pitch is very easy and that my audience will very much vibe with what you guys are doing. Can we collab? You guys down to pay me to shill you a little harder so I can put you in videos that aren't necessarily related to analytics? They said, sure, let's try this out, see how it goes. It went very well. And now they're trying to take influencer marketing more seriously because someone who organically likes and trusts them, me, I don't want to work with other analytics companies because these guys get it. They're the ones I want to use. They're the ones I was already using. I used them for 3 years before I ever did a sponsors thing with them because they're the best solution as far as I'm concerned. And they only were down to work with me because of that. If I was some random influencer that doesn't ship product and doesn't use PostHog, they probably would have been way more skeptical. But they really wanted to invest in trust, which is why I was a good starting point for them to do this type of thing. But when this trust and the agreement that comes from it is broken, people start to get angry fast. Often more so than if the company was closed source in the first place. Yep, that's another really big deal. If you start open source and start closing things off, people will be way more pissed than if you just didn't do it ever. They recognize this and they try to prevent it by doing the following. Remain alive and sustainable as a company, set clear expectations of how open source works at PostHog, and keep the license the exact same as they've grown. And now we have point 4. Open source generates more feedback and contribution. I want to show you guys an example of this. They're open source and transparent. I'll just show you guys the thread. Here is Julius from T3 Chat, Ping, etc., asking them for an ETA on when the support for AI SDK version 5 would exist in their analytics. Because they have a wrapper at PostHog that you can wrap around a model provider for the AI SDK to get more in-depth tracing without having to do any additional work. I actually refused to use this initially. The team pushed for me to because they really wanted more people on this so they could learn more from it. And it did solve a lot of problems that I was causing for myself. So I put the work in, moved us to use the PostHog/AI wrapper, ran into a lot of issues around how that worked on Vercel Fluid Compute, causing crashes that would break generations quite a bit. And yeah, there was a while where I, just to be fully transparent, regretted moving over to this because it causes bugs in prod. It didn't collect much more data than I was already collecting. And now it was blocking our AI SDK v5. So I was very unhappy about this. Thankfully, it was open source. So when I complained to them, I could look at the code and find these specific issues. I could patch package it very easily. And they took the time to cut issues for all of it, link it to me, and link all of the different PRs as they were fixing all of the issues that I ran into. We were able to go back and forth throughout to figure out how to fix all these bugs. And they fixed them. It was great. It took like 3 or 4 days, I think. And that back and forth was great. But now we have the ASDK 5 problem, where they weren't prioritizing the update for v5. We didn't feel like waiting. And when I say we, I mostly mean Julius and Yash. Yash being our intern and Julius being the wizard. Yash filed a PR. We didn't even ask him to. It just suddenly he linked it in our Eng chat and said, hey, I made this. And this is his PR where he got V5 working for the SDK. Didn't test it on every edge case. We're getting events in and it's working for us on T3 chat. And this ended up being the reference point for the official PR they did soon after. It wasn't even that like necessarily this code was useful. I haven't looked to see how much of Yasha's code was used or not. But what does matter is that we showed how much we wanted this by having a team member file the PR, which kind of lit the fire under their ass to go fix it. Oh, thanks to Yash for the base PR. Yep, he did use it as a base. Pretty cool. Hopefully this drives home the point though. The open source nature of the code massively increases the amount of back and forth we can have in these loops, where it's not just, we want this, oh, we'll add it eventually, and then Slack goes dead for 2 weeks, and then we bump them and say, hey, any chance you've worked on this yet? That all goes away here, where instead it's, hey, here's the issue on your GitHub that we care about. They say, oh, we plan on doing this at this point in time, and our response is, oh, we already have it done, here's a PR. That iteration loop ends up being much more effective, both for them as a business because it helps them understand what we need better, and for us as consumers of the business because we can push them in a direction more effectively. A rule I had to make a while back is that if I can't get a hold of the CEO of a company, it might be a bad choice for us to adopt it. Because if we can't steer them in the direction that we need for our product, we might just be stuck. And I've had enough problems with various vendors that I need the ability to get things pushed in the right direction. This is a huge lever. Like, I'm friends with James. I could hit up the CEO and make changes happen, and believe me, I have. But I don't have to. We can just comment on an issue, file a PR, chat in Slack, and make change happen. That's a huge benefit of open source. Not just because I as an individual customer am happy, and because you as the person maintaining this part of the product are happy. It's that this turns me into an advocate. We now feel more bought into PostHog. The fact that they have code we wrote in their project means that we care more about it. We're more invested in it. We're more likely to tell others about it. We're more likely to talk about it on stream like this. Those are the huge benefits that you get, is that level of investment and trust compounds really, really fast. A failure mode of many startups is a lack of people who care. Open source startups often face the opposite challenge, an overwhelming amount of support in the form of feedback and contributions. The solution to this is channeling the contributions. For example, we realize PostHog is more difficult to contribute code for than most other open source projects. So we need to encourage people to contribute in other ways, like making feature requests in the roadmap open so people can comment on it. It also helps them with identifying potential user interviews and beta testers. They also make it easy for people to contribute to the website. Roughly 10% of PRs on the posthog.com repo are from contributors outside of PostHog. I've even seen people write entirely new docs pages. That's really cool, actually. We had this on Upload thing where somebody wrote an incredible customization PR, which allowed for users to customize the styles of our provided buttons and components, and also a huge documentation page for it. Fioli here did a 1,700 line of code PR for adding customization to all of the UI components that we built. We never ended up merging this, but we ended up learning a ton from it and using it as a base for a lot of the design work that we did. And also, similar to what we just saw with PostHog, it kicked us to really figure out how we're going to do customization. Oh, and one last part, having cool merch and being generous with giving it out to contributors. This is also a huge one. We actually have some merch that we did with them. It's probably sold out by now. Yeah, the Upload thing, t-shirts. This was actually really funny because we had done the first chat about doing these t-shirts right before I launched T3 chat. And I was like, hey, we should probably do T3 chat for these instead. But they really liked Upload thing and wanted to do it with that. Very happy with the results though. Merch them is the phrase that they have for giving people merch when they do cool things. I would just merch them, deep echoing voice, merch them. We've been in touch, we should merch them. Providing users ways to contribute outside of code, we maintain the community ethos of open source without asking people to make the heavy investment to get up to speed on development. We pay people to do that instead. Or I pay Yash. Either way. The contributions we do get are hugely helpful, though. They help us ship a product that is both more polished and better tailored to our users' actual use cases. Okay, this all sounds great, but what are the downsides? There has to be something wrong with this, right? Well, monetization's the big one. Let's see what else they have. Some perceived downsides, like fear of having one's work judged, rarely happen in reality. Most people will never see your work, and your coworkers will almost always be tougher critics than the community is. Yeah, no one's reading the source code and complaining. I did that once and I regretted it, so yeah, not really a thing. The first one is monetization. Every open source startup struggles with how to best monetize. Enterprise plans, paid self-hosting plans, cloud. We tried a combination of these, but we settled on cloud hosting. This enabled us to build a sustainable business while continuing to offer a free product. The vast majority of people use PostHog through the cloud, and over 90% of them are doing it for free because their free limits are so generous. The breadth of PostHog made the decision easier. While users love having more products, it made hosting PostHog more complicated. We make up for this by offering a generous free tier for all products on the cloud. And most people, the reason they want self-hosting is so they can host it for free or really cheap. So by making the free tier so generous, you don't end up wanting that as badly. But point 2 is more important. Support is not free. Because open source projects offer the code for free, people expect support to be free as well. Maintainers often burn out from dealing with a flood of support requests without the resources to respond. We felt this too with our former paid Kubernetes deployments. They were becoming too complex and difficult to debug from afar. Support was taking a significant amount of engineering resources because you can't just have a support person do it, and Eng has to. It wasn't a good experience for the users. Eventually, they decided to shut down the Kubernetes deployment offer where they would help you manage your deployments and redirect the engineering resources to make the cloud version work for the former paying Kubernetes customers with things like SOC 2 compliance. And then the scariest part, you might be competing with yourself. It'd be hard to balance a free and open source product against a paid hosted option. No matter what you do, you'll face allegations that you're making the open source version worse intentionally. Definitely not a thing we've had to cover before. Definitely not a thing I had to break up with a sponsor over before. Never happened. Never heard of that before. To be honest, 5 years in, we're still figuring this one out. PostHog's become more complex to host, even for them. The infra team's now 5 people. Kind of funny that a company as big as PostHog still only has 5 people on infra. You'd be amazed at how small each individual team is at PostHog. They really are focusing on keeping things tight and delivering fast. A lot of companies in this position will just grow infinitely, but they're being strategic and careful. We continue to offer a generous free tier, but many people still want to self-host and find it difficult to do so. Again, they are working on it. Actually, to plug another sponsor that you guys know I like too much, Convex open sourced, I think it would have been early to mid last year. I don't know when they did it, but they fully open sourced. And not only did they open source in the sense that all the code is there, the CEO will personally go and try to deploy Convex on other clouds every couple weeks for fun. A few weeks ago, he spent the weekend trying to deploy it on Railway, found some issues, and made the team fix them so it's easier to deploy. The Convex founders actively making it easier to compete with Convex using Convex. Because in reality, if you want to do this and scale it, it's way easier to just use them. We're not self-hosting Convex for T3 chat. We're using them straight up because I don't want to deal with that stuff. And it's a safe bet for them to make because most others won't either. There's definitely a spectrum of how self-hostable is the thing. There's also a spectrum of the license for said self-hosting things, but you get the idea. What hasn't changed is open source being a core value of the company. We have a broader definition of open source than most. We think it's not just the code you write, but your overall culture. We try to be open source in all the ways we can, from the handbook and roadmap and even the newsletter. They're all testaments to this. We found this to be the better solution as it's a lot easier to be consistently open when your code isn't the only thing that you open source. I like this one a lot. Words by Ian, who snuck a Canadianism in here. This is actually really cool. They have a poll at the bottom to vote for what they should write about next. Very, very cool. This was an awesome read and has definitely helped me better understand why and how PostHog open sourced and how to think about open source for our own stuff too. What do you think though? Time for us to open source T3 chat? I have a bad feeling about this comment section now that I've said that. Oh boy. Until next time, peace nerds.